Good evening. I'm Peter Gelb, the Met's General Manager. Thank you, Duke, for your introduction. We're very happy to be back here for another Met participation in the Works in Process program. I'm not saying that we timed it on purpose, but with Trump claiming these days to be Christ, it's an especially good opportunity to experience the spiritual beauty of John Adams' nativity masterpiece, El Niño. When it opens at the Met on April 23rd, and I know you're all going to be there. You can think of it as our antidote of artistic truth to all the hateful political lies and misdeeds taking place these days, from the denial of basic human rights to attempting to overturn democracy, all backed by Trump's new line of $60 Bibles. My advice is that your money would be better spent buying tickets to El Niño. That's my public service announcement for this evening. John Adams' El Niño is a powerful story of birth and renewal, with a plot and libretto organized by Peter Sellers, his longtime collaborator, that ranges from the birth of Christ to Herod's slaughter of the innocents to the early years of Jesus. Typical of an Adams-Sellers collaboration, the text draws from multiple sources, in this case both the Old and New Testament, as well as contemporary Latinx poets, amongst others, and being an oratorio, the Met's magnificent chorus plays a major role. El Niño is John Adams' fourth work to be performed at the Met. We're very proud of that. Following Dr. Atomic in 2008, Nixon in China in 2011, and the death of Klinghoffer in 2014. And next season, we'll be presenting John's newest opera, Antony and Cleopatra. Although John, who lives in California, will be here for the premiere, he is not with us in person tonight, so here are a few brief video comments from him to start the evening off.
It was 1999, a year before the millennium, and I was asked by the Châtelet in Paris and San Francisco Symphony to compose a work to celebrate the millennium. Every composer alive was busy that year, and I thought about the millennium and what it signified, and of course that made me think of Handel's Messiah, which was, a piece that I'd grown up with. And I'd always had this secret desire to create my own Messiah, the nativity story. My longtime collaborator, Peter Sellers, helped me put together a libretto. And it was Peter's brilliant idea to tell this story through the voices primarily of women, and also Hispanic women. Sellers had this really brilliant idea of, when we get in this story to the Massacre of the Innocents, of utilizing a poem by the great Mexican poet Rosario Castellanos about this terrible massacre. Government troops, National Guard in Mexico, executed radical students. It was 1968. This is a way of moving a biblical theme to the present. And I have to say that it'll be a peak moment in the Met production. The important thing about El Niño is that it toggles back and forth between extreme intimacy, the kind of intimacy that a mother might have with an infant, and then these outbursts of choral force. And much of the choral writing is very joyous. So it's going to be an interesting experience, to hear this in a space as large as the Met. I have no question that the big moments will be big and impressive, but achieving that sense of real focus and intimacy, that's going to be a real challenge. But I suspect that Liliana and our wonderful conductor, my longtime friend Marin Alsop, will nail it.
So those in whom John has placed his trust are with me here right now.
No pressure.
But he does raise a very interesting question, which is, in a space as large as the Met, because the Met is the largest opera house in the world, how those intimate moments will play out. But before we get into that, first let me formally introduce the wonderful people sitting here. To my right is the director who recently received a Tony Award nomination for her direction of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth at Lincoln Center Theater, the production that actually first brought her to my attention. And the New York Times, which sometimes gets things right, praised her work as very accurately, as the gorgeous maximalist revival this play deserves. And I think you'll find that her tropical vision for El Niño is also an opulent feast for the eyes. This is her Metropolitan Opera debut. Please welcome Liliana Blaine Cruz. And to Liliana's right is the esteemed conductor and frequent collaborator of John Adams, who is making her overdue Met debut. The first woman to head a major orchestra in the U.S. For 14 years, she was the music director of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. Today, multitasking, she's chief conductor of the ORF Vienna Radio Symphony Orchestra, the artistic director and chief conductor of the Polish National Radio Symphony, and principal guest conductor of London's Philharmonic Orchestra. And she still has time for the Met. Please welcome Maestro Marin Alsop. Liliana, you've described your creative team as a family, and sitting next to Marin's, on her right, is one of Liliana's principal family members, set designer Adam Rigg. Adam's set designs for The Skin of Our Teeth earned a Tony nomination as well, and he's extremely busy and doing many different theatrical things. We'll mention some of them later, but in Adam's auspicious Met debut, which will be, I believe, please welcome him now. So, Liliana, let's start with you. It was over a breakfast a couple of years ago when you and I were discussing actually another project, composer Missy Mazzoli's new opera, Lincoln and the Bardo, which you're going to be directing at the Met, that I asked you what else you might be interested in directing. And without missing a beat, you said El Niño, which seemed at the time to me to be a somewhat unlikely choice, only because I knew of it as an oratorio. But obviously you had something big in mind as we see it unfolding, and as a fully staged work. So tell us, why El Niño? What brought you to it in the first place?
Yeah, can I just say that meeting was so nerve-wracking. Hi, I was like, I'm meeting with Peter Gelb. I want to work at the opera. Give me the Met. And then I tried to be very cool. I was like, yes. El Niño, have you heard of it?
It seemed to work.
It worked. But I
seem to have overcome your nervousness.
I did. I got over it. I was told to behave, friends. But that's very hard for me to do. Hello. I'm sorry, I can't. I have to do it. So basically, we just gone through a pandemic. The world was shook. And I think we're still shaken. We're still wrestling with what does it mean to live in the world right now. And when I think about John Adams' music, I feel that he, in many ways, him and Peter Sellers access that enormity of what it means to be alive, right? Like we are literally shaken through the music into questioning, how do we want to be in the world? And looking at the news, looking at kind of the chaos that we were experiencing, I think the question that's at the center of El Niño is like, who are we, as human beings, and how do we want to go forward? We are capable of such beauty, such creativity. We are capable to create life, and we are also so capable of utter horrific acts of destruction, from slaying children, which, if you're watching the news now, we're living in that moment of creative, genius things being made and people showing acts of generosity, and also people being capable of doing the most devastating things to the most innocent. And so when I think about why I want to come to the theater or why I want to come to the opera, it's to, in some ways, reckon with that. And I think both John Adams and Peter Sellers, like, they ask us to feel that in our bones. And that's why I felt like it was time to do El Niño now.
And El Niño was something when did you first encounter it?
I was in grad school, and I worked with a really amazing dramaturg, Sundar Ganglani, and he was like, I think you need to listen to El Niño. And I was like, okay, what is that? and then I did, and I was amazed, yeah.
So, and Maren, you, as a longtime collaborator of John's, you have never conducted El Niño before. This is your first time, right? So Maren has spent the day today working, 6 hours with the orchestra? So we're very grateful to everyone here has been working really hard, including our singers.
It's the singers who worked with me all day,
Right.
and who are going to sing. They deserve the praise.
I think you all do. Being married to a conductor, I know conductors work hard too.
We pretend to. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, now I know. So some people consider El Niño to be John Adams' greatest work. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I don't. I think. Who am I to judge that? I mean, I think it's a very different work for him. I don't know.
What makes it different?
It's different because it's. I mean, all of his works are very thought-provoking. They make you. You're changed when you leave the theater after you experience one of his works. This is what great art is to me. But this is a piece that has so many different levels because we all come to it with our own prejudgment. We all have an idea of what the Christmas story is about when we come to it. And it's a complex baggage that we bring because each of us, whatever religion you were brought up, whatever your family did, you have all these things that you're coming to the show with already. And then this is a look at the story of the birth of Jesus in a way that's really unexpected, I would say. And it's not simple at all. It's very complicated. The texts that they've chosen, the Spanish texts, are really they're not what you would think he would put in. They have tentacles that go in all different directions, in my opinion. And so they force you to think about all kinds of different things. So I'm not explaining it very well, but it's a multi-dimensional experience. And I think each one of you that comes to this show, it's so important that you do come with your own ideas and then just be open and let this flow through you. So, I mean, musically, I think it's not an easy access piece. Some of John's pieces, I think, are, they got a great dance groove, and you can just go through it, and that's super. That's not this piece. There's a lot of listening that's required. So I think it's going to be an intense experience for everyone. I'm not selling it very well, am I, Peter? Sorry, that was not. But please come.
There's a lot of beauty in it as well.
There's a lot of beauty, but it's not that kind of bling.
Not as catchy.
Yeah, it's not that with the hook kind of beauty. It's a subtle beauty that's built out of atmosphere and different moods and different colors. The orchestration is incredible. I mean, I don't think maybe once before I've conducted an orchestra with two guitars, who are really in the center of things. And then there's samplers and there are keyboards and harp. It's a very, in a way, it's a very ethnic kind of orchestration too. It's more folk music in that way. But then there's a huge orchestra also backing it up. So it goes back and forth, as John said.
Right. So it really is unlike anything he's written.
Definitely.
So Liliana, actually, Maren brings up an interesting point, which is to direct a piece. I mean, what is typical or characteristic of John and Peter's collaborations is the fact that they are not always really linear. So how do you deal with that from a dramaturgical point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We were working on a scene the other day, Pues está tiritando, and it's poetry, right? It's in Spanish, and it's kind of like the babe is sleeping. Should I let him sleep? Should I let him be awake? Should I let him sleep? Be awake? You know what I mean? Or what's going to solve his problem? The air, the fire, the air, the fire, the water, the land. And in many ways, as a director, it's fun for me to think about how to create the scene, essentially. Like, what is the context in which they're talking about? In the first act in particular, we see, first of all, there's multiple Marys, right? So in the traditional nativity story, you have one Mary. In this, there's two. There's the mezzo-soprano, and then there's the soprano.
Mary of the land and Mary of the sea.
Exactly. Well, that's something that I, came up with as an organizing principle, right? Because one thing that was central inside of the story is this idea of migration, right? Like, you have this child, and then you have to find safety. And in this universe or this production, it was fun to figure out how to tell the stories of two Marys simultaneously. And that's something as a director I really love. Like, you talked about tentacles. There's a multi-layered dimensionality to the storytelling, which I think is really wonderful to think about. Like, the story of Mary is not a singular story. In fact, there have been many Marys throughout time, from the past of biblical ages to the present. And in some ways, building the production around that layered multiplicity of many times existing at once was really exciting for me.
Adam, so you have collaborated with Liliana a lot, and you also have a number of works playing right now all around the city, right?
Yeah.
You have Teeth at the new musical Teeth at Playwrights Horizon, and also the musical Illinois, which is transferring to Broadway shortly.
Opening the day after the Met.
Very good.
Very busy week.
Well, I just hope you have enough time carved out for us.
I've said I'm there for the Met.
How would you describe your approach to designing for the stage, and then we'll get into.
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefit of working with Liliana is I met Liliana in grad school. Liliana has shaped my approach to art making in general, as she often does when you interact with Liliana. Most people are kind of like, you have time before Liliana and time after Liliana. But I think what was so exciting about this piece and making this space and working with Liliana is the kind of like the tentacles of it. Like, I think that a lot of the way I was taught to design was like a simplification and really a focus on architecture. And Liliana is like throws out the architecture, and it's about like texture and pattern and conversations and the different conversations that this piece has inside of it, and how that kind of grows into this maximalist approach, which is just kind of how I approach all theater making now, is like all the ideas and all the satelliting and trying to cram it into a small quarter-inch box while I make the model.
So why don't we maybe, Liliana, if you and Adam could talk a little bit about what your inspirations are for the design of this particular production, and then we also have some images from the technical rehearsals that we can show, and maybe you could talk about. So
one of the, in terms of thinking about migration and thinking of Mary as
you see?
Oh, yeah. Hey, look, there's a set. It's colorful. She's from the Afro-Caribbean, so I talked to Adam a lot about like Afro-Caribbean paintings, which is in some ways very two-dimensional sometimes, but they have pops of color and vibrancy and density. So you're looking at a kind of two-dimensional plane, and yet it's filled with people, it's filled with color. And that was in some ways the kind of starting place. There's a big kind of shift between the first act and the second act. In the first act, we're kind of living in a lush landscape when you think about the tropics. Like, for instance, Haiti. It's beautiful, colorful mountains, green, verdant energy. The sea is close by, and we move through that kind of verdant energy into the second act, which is, for me, like the crossover, a different kind of border, and it becomes deserty, it becomes harsh, it becomes a more inhospitable landscape for human survival, and yet that's the place that they need to go and search for safety, what I'm calling Herod's landscape. What's amazing about Adam is I can be like, it needs to feel like a painting, it needs to feel alive, it needs to feel verdant, and Adam will be like, cool, great. here's how we can do this. And we work in large part with Hannah Wasilewski, who did the video design, and Izao, who did the lighting. But I think what's Adam's genius is they've been able to coalesce many ideas into a really strong shape and essentially creating playground for many different images to kind of move through.
Yeah, and I think we were also, early on, we talked about, like, we have these conversations around, like, what is the approach? Is it like a classic design approach? Is it like a deconstructed one-room space? And we kind of, because of the kind of history of the Messiah and these kind of Jesus stories, we were like, let's do an old school portal and border system, which is like the frames, and kind of play with the two-dimensionality of like Baroque scenery and all of that kind of feel, but then let's take these Afro-Caribbean painter influences and also some like Afro-futuristic painters that we were looking at too, and incorporate that into the textures. And so we work, the great thing about the family, as Liliana calls it, is it's a group of designers who we've been working with since grad school. So we have this shorthand with each other where like I can send one paint sample to Hannah, the video designer, and she just makes these insane kind of things, and she takes my paintings, deconstructs them, adds to them, and it's just this back and forth conversation that's been going on for
But this image features
puppets as well.
Of James Ortiz.
Yeah, James Ortiz, who's a new family member, and pulled in immediately. He did Skin of Our Teeth with us. And yeah, it's the same thing. It's just, I think what's great about like such a tight-knit group of artists is like, we just start texting constantly. Like, there's no formal kind of sit down. We just are constantly sending back and forth everything, and yeah, tentacles out.
Yeah, and that puppet that you just saw was in some ways like we were thinking about how do you represent the divine in this space? What does divinity look like? Like how does an angel appear? And James and I and the team came up with this idea of the eye, right? Like when you look at like old school, the Bible is old school now. When you think about like the descriptions, it's multi-leveled eyes with wings. They're not human, right? And so finding a way to unify landscape and nature with the divine was something that was really exciting to us. So this is Herod. This is Herod's statue. This is Herod's landscape. Again, thinking about Act 2 when we leave the kind of comfort of the greenery into a kind of more inhospitable shape and space. Yeah. But then there's still magic. Magic for me, God is pink, okay? A fuchsia, the divine, and thinking about how nature, I mean, it's called El Niño. El Niño is also a weather system, right? And you think about climate change. There's so much language in here. The earth is burning. The earth is burning. They have a lot of apocryphal texts inside of here. And it's a warning. You realize there's so much history around everybody being like, pay attention to nature, pay attention to the earth, pay attention to the place that we're living. And I think that's what's so thrilling about the design is like nature and the world feel very, very front and foremost. And this is the final scene, palm tree.
And there's a lot more than that.
There's a lot more than that.
That's just a sampler. So great. Thank you so much. So I think now it's time for some music. Which will be performed by our three leads, soprano Julia Bullock, who is making her Met debut and has been described by John Adams as his muse, mezzo-soprano Janae Bridges, who is last seen on the Met stage as Nefertiti in Philip Glass's Akhenaten, and baritone Devon Tynes, who is also making his Met debut and is an acclaimed interpreter of John's music. First, Devon will sing the stirring selection Shake the Heavens, which is the text of which is drawn from the Old Testament. It's about faith, I guess, right? Then Julia and Janae will sing the Spanish language duet from another poem by the great Mexican poet Rosario Castellanos, not the one that John was referring to, which was inspired by the poet's personal tragedies bearing children. Only one of her 3 children survived childbirth, which inspired this poem, which became the duet. So are there any points, Maren or Liliana, you'd like to make about the music or narrative of these selections?
I think you're starting with one of the apex moments of the whole show. This is, it's a modern day vision of these words.
And they're going to be sung together. So first Devon will sing. And so and is there anything else you want to about it?
I think it's a bop. We'll see.
Okay.
All right, okay. All right, and with that, please welcome Devon Torrance, accompanied by Met Assistant Conductor Dimitri Dover.
We've been told where to sit.
It's optional. Bravi to the three of you. You know, we were talking about the sources of the aria and the duet, and I wonder if we could start off by talking about them with the words of the duet, particularly. So it's so beautiful. I mean, they're so different, the duet and the aria. I explained that the poet had experienced great difficulty bearing children, and she wrote a poem about that, which is what is what you were comprised the text. Can you talk a little bit about that? Those songs. That duet.
You can say.
No, don't please.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I think it's really an interesting, one of the most, in my opinion, interesting pieces in the whole story because it's so exposed, you know, and we come to a standstill and we talk about things that are a bit taboo to speak about, I think, you know, when bringing another human into this world. And the text says, I feel broken and in a way empty, you know, and I'm giving my body over to this being, and in this case it happens to be Jesus. So it's a very powerful moment in the opera, in the oratorio, where I personally just feel like this is a moment where we are really giving ourselves over, musically, but also, kind of spiritually in a way.
Yeah, I think it's a moment of surrender for the character of Mary and for anybody who's been able to participate in the process of ushering a life into the world and nurture it. You know, sometimes days are great, other days can be really challenging, and everyone's experience is so different. But what I love in this piece is that even over the course of one song, you get these extremes of human experience that we each can be humbled by, be in awe of. And I think one thing, at least that I love about this particular staging of El Niño, is that we are witnessing each other in the process. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not jumping the gun just talking about that, but it's been so gratifying during the rehearsal process these past 2 weeks, because we are all pretty much on stage in every single piece. The choir, this amazing, amazing group of dancers. They're really all just tremendous artists and craftsmen and women and people themselves. So yeah, I do love that this poem that Cassianos wrote was named after her son, Gabriel. But then the angel, Gabriel, is who is delivering this message. So there's so many layers. There's such a depth to all of the material that was selected by John and Peter to include in this piece, and it just erupts in sometimes the most delicate but also ferocious ways.
We heard the ferocity in Devon's piece that he sang first, and you know, unlike Julia and Janae, who both are playing Mary. Mary of the Land, Mary of the Sea. You're playing several different characters. So
I play man in many incarnations. You know, it's really wonderful, the balance of the sexes in a way, because it really does center on the woman story, in that there are multiple women represented, and even reflected in the dancers, and kind of a multiplicity of womanhood. And then there's just like one Uberman, and it's a fun and crazy role, because it spans, you know, playing Joseph to Herod to the voice of God to a benevolent children's narrator, all in one go. But Shake the Heavens is my favorite thing that John's ever written. It really is a bop, you know, and you'll hear it with the full orchestra. You'll just kind of want to head bop along. And it's really an incredible example of John's mission to take up his own Messiah. You know, there are things that are very directly influenced by the piece by Handel, you know, thus saith the Lord of hosts, and so on. And Handel really incredibly text paints there with the orchestra, and John, you know, explodes it by a million by really saying, I'm going to show and shake every angle of this text. And I think it seems like there's a similar vibe of thinking about these old Baroque forms and dumping out the contents to think about what are they structurally and how do you fill them with different things. And that's throughout John's music. I think he really likes Baroque gesture. It's very naked and raw and applicable. I mean, he does it in Dr. Atomic, and Batter My Heart. He also does it in Girls of the Golden West. But it's really fun to reinvent those old shapes in new ways.
And what would you say is really the essence of this particular work for you?
I think it really is in the finale. I hope I don't give it away, but there's a children's choir, and the story goes through so much in so many places, and it's kind of the perfect and only way to resolve it, which is to kind of look toward the future. I feel like that's a very Peter inspired motion, and I get to stop singing and speak, and it's a really beautiful narrative text that's about Jesus performing essentially one of the first miracles, which is asking a palm tree to bear water. And it's really beautiful at the end of this whole depthful and complex experience to say there is always hope and there's the possibility for things you couldn't imagine.
That's beautiful. All three of you have had a history with this piece. I know at one point, Julia, you led the charge to do a revised adaptation of it that was done up at the Cloisters. How does this production sort of change your perception of the piece, or has it changed your perception to the three of you?
Yeah, the idea of taking this 2-hour work and distilling it to 1 hour so that more people could experience it, because it just costs less money, was because, yes, I loved the work, loved the poetry, loved the work, and all the intention around it. One thing, though, I haven't sung the full piece. I think it's been 7 years, and it was the first piece of John's that I ever sang. It was with the LA Phil. Devon was on that. My husband was the cover conductor for it. And I do remember thinking of that children's choir just as the water was being released from this tree, and then the children start talking about moving swaying in unison together. Tears were streaming down my face. I think they stream down our face in every rehearsal. So there's a real magnitude to this work, and it is truly magnificent. And that's not something that can be diminished, I don't think, in any iteration of the piece. But the way that this team has put together a vibrant, vibrating, it's like vibrant and vibrating all the time. It resonates in every way. I am so thrilled to be a part of bringing this piece to New York in this state. And I hope a lot of people see it.
Me too. I second all of that.
Further to, I guess, the differences in the different iterations, Julia so beautifully initiated this chamber version with John and Peter that we've done a few times now at St. John the Cathedral with American Modern Opera Company and other places. And it just, I think, is a testament to the genius of the construction of the piece, that it can bear so many different forms and contexts. And it's been really beautiful to play, in close proximity with really dear colleagues and find all of that intimacy that John talks about and still be able to erupt. But this production is maximal. Every inch of the stage is covered in people and color and just energy. And I'm excited for just the scale of everything, and what Liliana was saying about it's operating at so many different levels. It's the sort of thing that you could come back 3-4 times and not see every single beautiful dance move, beautiful change of shifting of light or subtlety in the staging. There's just so much to behold, so come behold it.
Are we good spokespeople for this work?
Excellent. You know, John, when I was speaking with John recently, he was telling me that for him, perhaps one of the most powerful pieces in the work is the aria that you sing, Julia, in the second half, which is also by the same poet, Rosario Castellanos. Pardon my Mexican accent.
Rosario Castellanos is her name.
Castellanos. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. You can put me to shame. This was about, early we saw a video of John describing the using this poem, which is about the student massacre in Mexico City in 1968, as an allegory for the slaughter of the innocents. And this is what you sing. This. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You don't have to sing it.
Yeah. Oh, I know. So this massacre took place in Mexico City in 1968, and it was right before the Olympics, I believe. There was a demonstration of students and civilians, and the government went out and just shot them all. But then the next morning, there was no reporting on the event. It was like it never happened. But amazingly, this poet wanted to ensure that history was recorded, and that's not something that was going to be erased. Otherwise, we would continue to repeat patterns. And unfortunately, of course, history has shown us that we are in inescapable cycles of violence that we inflict on each other. So that is what this piece is all about. The full choir is also utilized in this portion of the work. It's an 11-minute aria, and the choir just keeps saying over and over again, like almost a broken record. I remember, we remember, I remember, we remember, and the word itself breaks in John's setting. It is the point in the piece of this historical story, centuries old, where we are catapulted immediately into a more present day, and it's intended to knock each of us very directly.
Great. Liliana, maybe if you would talk about some of the other textual text sources, because there are so many different sources. And could you describe some of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. But first, I just want to say that this team of singers is so phenomenal. Like, they're yeah, let's give them a round of applause. Wow. Truly. I say that because there's so many different, it's a collage, right? It's a collage of text. It's not one linear pathway, like one author writing. And they have found a way to both internalize poetry and take it into action while singing incredibly difficult music and singing it truthfully and with purpose and with love, right? And I think so much of their artistry is also in their open-heartedness as artists. It's such a generous room. And when you speak about like an antidote, like a piece that's an antidote to the hatred in the world, to the violence, to the divisiveness, like I feel so lucky to be in a room that, like, you included, you know, to that opens with the sense of like, okay, yes, let's try, let's go there, let's be open together, you know? And so we have poets from like Rosario Castellanos to Gabriela Mistral, which was a poet in Chile, and she wrote The Christmas Star, which again is kind of this amazing, you know, story of this little girl who's clutching on a star and she won't let it go, which I've asked them to translate into being in labor pains, you know, as one of them is singing in a flying boat and one is giving birth on stage, and they said, sure, okay, no problem, which is insane. Then we have text from the Haggai, you know, which is kind of like, wait, so I'm gonna be Joseph, and then I'm gonna go into a dream from the Gospel of Pseudo Matthew, you know, and then wake up as the voice of God. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, great, you know? Like, so again, it's pulling from all of these different sources to create, in some ways, like that panoply of like time. Like if we're moving all the way from the Bible to, 1968, we get a sense of how we're all connected. And that's what I think is really remarkable about, Peter Sellers' arrangement, is like we are digging into, in many ways, I think, sacred texts, right? Sacred texts. And you spoke a little bit about like the divine, right? And spirit. I think that's also critical inside of this. Like we're trying to access something bigger than ourselves, to remind ourselves that we are human. And that's what the piece, I think, does.
Beautifully said. Maren, just... we should come back to a final musical question for you, which is, we haven't talked about the 3 countertenors in this piece.
Oh, yeah, minor detail.
Tell us about the 3 countertenors.
Yeah, well, it's funny, I had 2 students attending the rehearsal today, and they said, wow, 3 countertenors in one room. And I said, no, actually, they have 3 understudies, too, so there were 6 today. So, yeah, but I mean, it's such a different sound, isn't it? It's the sound of the countertenor is, I mean, it's so evocative and so weird, and unexpected, right? This is the thing, when they start singing, the first moment, they're featured in the opening, and when they start singing, it sort of changes it defies your expectations. And so you're drawn into this world of magic, in a way, by the sound of that voice. And so as a trio, it's something incredibly beautiful because there's an innocence to it, but there's also an alien quality to it. I think, well, don't tell them I said this, right?
Just told out in New York. I don't know what you want to say about it.
You should have heard what I said about you before you came out. But
only good things.
yeah, no. So it's cool because I think it sets up this sense of magic and also that this is not what you've expected coming into the room.
Have you discussed this with John? When you do a score of his, he hasn't been here, of course, yet. But this is a score you're doing of his for the first time. Do you go over it with him?
I did, yeah. We did a Zoom, and I did because I had some questions, and he actually wanted to change a few things in the orchestra, which he did, to try to simplify a couple of things, a couple of rhythmic things. So we talked that through, and then he made the changes with the library. But I try to, it's as the conductor, we're constantly trying to find the phone number of the composer. And with Beethoven, I'm still, I'm at a loss. But he couldn't hear me anyway. But sorry, that was bad. Oh, that was bad. But. That was really terrible. I'm sorry, but when the composer, listen, you wanted some laughs. You told me, but when the composer is living, I mean, this is such a bonus. Sorry, that doesn't sound right either. But so I try to always take advantage as much as I can of that, and just trying not to be annoying to the composer also. But John knows that I'm always fascinated by his process and the thoughts before it. And he's so modest always that it's difficult to get him. He's always giving credit to everybody else as collaborators instead of, you are listening to the Beethoven of the 21st century, when you come to hear this piece. So I just remember that, this is we're privileged to be in the same space as John Adams.
Well, that's I think a very beautiful note to end on. Although Liliana, I know that you always like to have the last word, so.
Yes, I'd like to thank Peter Gelb for my new residency at the Met.
I told you not to talk about that. All right. Listen, Thank you so much. And,
Pleasure. I hope
think-
you can all come to see it. And hear it, most importantly. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.